Welcome back to the Manhwa Recap Vault. Today we are going somewhere very different. No fantasy, no isekai, no power systems, just pure, grounded, street-level storytelling set against one of the most important social issues in modern Korea: predatory lending. If you've been craving something that feels genuinely dangerous, something where the stakes are measured in broken bones and ruined families, rather than stat points and skill trees, this is it. No magic, no systems, no dungeons, no levels. Just two men, their fists, and a predatory lending empire that has swallowed entire communities whole. In a genre drowning in overpowered protagonists with divine abilities and legendary weapons, this manhwa strips everything back to something far more uncomfortable than any monster or demon. The machinery of debt. The kind of debt that multiplies while you sleep. The kind that turns ordinary people into property. This manhwa is called Bloodhounds. The Korean title is Sunyoung-gadul, Hunting Dogs. Written by Jung-chan and published on Nava Webtoon. It is one of the most grounded, most visceral stories to come out of Korea in the last decade, and it features two protagonists who are not chosen ones, not reincarnated heroes, not system-awakened warriors. They are broke, they are desperate, and they fight. Not with magic, but with judo. In a world where the real violence isn't physical at all. It's financial. This is Bloodhounds. And trust me, nothing in this genre has hit quite like this. Let me introduce you to Geon-woo, because understanding who he is before the chaos begins is essential to understanding why everything that follows matters so deeply. Geon-woo is a judo practitioner. Not a prodigy, not a champion, a practitioner. In the truest, most disciplined sense of the word. He learned his craft properly, obsessively, with the kind of quiet intensity that makes coaches pay attention. His technique is precise, economical, and textbook. He studies his opponents, identifies their patterns and dismantles them with calculated efficiency. His throws aren't spectacular. They are correct. And in a real fight, correct wins. He's the kind of fighter who conserves energy like it's a resource he can't afford to waste. Because it is. Every movement is purposeful. Every grip has intent. He doesn't overwhelm opponents, he reads them, waits for the mistake he knows is coming, and then punishes it with a counter so clean it looks like the other person threw themselves. But Geon-woo isn't fighting for glory. He isn't chasing a championship or a sponsorship deal. He's fighting because his mother is drowning. Not literally, financially. Geon-woo's mother took out loans, the kind of loans that seem manageable when you sign the paperwork, the interest rates buried in the fine print, the escalation clauses hidden behind language designed to confuse. The kind of loans where missing a single payment doesn't just add a fee, it multiplies the principal. It triggers penalties that compound on penalties. It transforms a sum that you could have repaid in 2 years into a figure that will follow you for the rest of your life. This is not a plot device, this is modern Korea. Predatory lending is an epidemic that has destroyed families, driven people to suicide, and created an entire shadow economy built on human desperation. In Korea, they call these operations sache, private loans, and the people who run them operate in the grey space between legality and organized crime. The interest rates can exceed several 100% annually. The collectors don't knock politely. And the legal system, by design or by neglect, rarely intervenes until it's far too late. Jung-chan doesn't use this as background flavor. It is the engine of the entire story. Geon-woo fights because every win he earns goes toward his mother's debt. Every bruise, every sprain, every night spent icing swollen knuckles, it's all in service of a number that keeps growing no matter how hard he works. He is running on a treadmill that someone else controls the speed of, and he knows it. And that's the worst part. He knows. Now let me introduce you to Woo-jin, because if Geon-woo is the brain of this story, Woo-jin is the beating, bruised, absolutely unbreakable heart. Woo-jin is not a technician. He is a brawler. His form would make any legitimate judo instructor weep. He fights on instinct, on rage, on an almost supernatural ability to absorb punishment that would hospitalize anyone else. He is loud. He is aggressive. He is the kind of person who walks into a room and the energy in that room fundamentally changes, for better or worse, depending entirely on whether you're standing with him or against him. Where Geon-woo is calculated, Woo-jin is chaos. Where Geon-woo conserves energy, Woo-jin spends it recklessly and somehow always finds more. He compensates for every technical deficiency with a willingness to endure that borders on the irrational. He doesn't win fights by being better. He wins them by being still standing long after his opponents expected him to fall. Together, Geon-woo and Woo-jin are an extraordinarily effective unit. Brain and body, precision and endurance, the strategist and the wall. They are also best friends. Not in the performative, narrative, convenient way that stories often deploy friendship. These two men have genuine history. They've starved together, slept on the same floor, stitched each other's cuts with supplies stolen from corner shops. Their bond is forged in shared suffering, and it is completely, unshakably real. The story earns your investment in these characters not through dramatic backstory reveals, but through small, consistent details. The way they split food without discussing it. The way one checks the other's hands after a fight without being asked. The quiet, unspoken contract between two people who have decided that whatever happens, they face it together. The world Geon-woo and Woo-jin inhabit is not glamorous. It's basements and warehouses, training halls that can't afford regulation equipment, an underground fighting circuit where the rules are simple. Fight, win, get paid. Lose, get nothing, or worse. But the underground has layers, and the deeper layers belong to people who deal in commodities significantly more profitable than fight purses. Enter Smile Capital. The name alone should tell you everything you need to know about how these people operate. They smile. They are polite. They wear expensive suits and speak in measured tones and present themselves as legitimate financial service providers, offering help to people in need. They are predatory loan sharks, and they are operating at a scale that makes street corner loan sharking look like a lemonade stand. Smile Capital is not a back alley operation. It is a machine. A billion-won empire built on the systematic exploitation of desperate people. Their business model is elegant in its cruelty. Lend money to people who cannot get loans from legitimate institutions, charge interest rates that guarantee default, and then use the default as leverage to extract everything the borrower has. Their homes, their businesses, their dignity. The CEO of Smile Capital operates above the law. Not around it, not outside it. Above it. Political connections, institutional relationships, a legal team that could bury any complaint in procedural motions for a decade. The kind of power that means complaints disappear, investigations stall, witnesses reconsider, and the people who owe money, the vulnerable, the desperate, the people with no legal representation and no understanding of their rights, they simply comply, because what choice do they have? This is the entity that Geon-woo's mother owes money to. This is the machine that is slowly, methodically, legally consuming his family. And this is where the inciting event occurs, the moment that transforms Geon-woo and Woo-jin from desperate fighters trying to survive into something far more dangerous. They meet a moneylender, Not a predator, an actual legitimate lender. Someone who operates in the same financial underworld but with something resembling a conscience. Someone who needs muscle. Specifically, who needs people who can fight, who can take a hit, who can walk into a room full of people who don't want to pay and make them reconsider. He needs debt collectors. He needs bloodhounds. And that is exactly what Geon-woo and Woo-jin become. Sunwon-gadul, hunting dogs, debt collectors who use their judo skills not in the ring, but in the streets, recovering money from people who borrowed from the wrong organizations. The work is morally complicated. They're not heroes rescuing innocents. They're collecting debts. Real debts, owed by real people who are often just as desperate as Geon-woo's own mother. The difference is that the moneylender they work for operates with something approaching fairness. The interest is steep but not predatory. The terms are clear, and when someone genuinely cannot pay, there's room for negotiation rather than destruction. But even legitimate debt collection requires a certain capacity for intimidation, and Geon-woo and Woo-jin discover something uncomfortable about themselves. They're good at it. Not because they enjoy threatening people, but because years of fighting have given them a presence, a physicality that makes persuasion significantly easier when persuasion fails. It's morally grey, it's physically dangerous, and it puts them on a direct collision course with Smile Capital. Because when you start recovering debts that Smile Capital consider theirs, when you start pulling people out of their machinery, you become a problem. And Smile Capital does not tolerate problems. It eliminates them. The escalation in Bloodhounds is masterfully paced. It doesn't happen in a single dramatic scene, it accumulates. One job leads to another. One recovered debt reveals a larger network. One act of defiance triggers consequences that demand a larger act of defiance. Geon-woo and Woo-jin begin to understand the scale of what Smile Capital actually is. It's not just loan sharking. It's an ecosystem, a food chain, and the people at the bottom of that chain are not criminals or gamblers or reckless spenders. They are shop owners who needed bridge financing, parents who couldn't afford medical bills, students who took out loans for tuition and found themselves trapped in a compound interest nightmare before they'd even graduated. They discover borrowers who have been trapped for years, people who took out modest loans and now owe 10 times the original amount. People who have signed over property, business assets, even their labor to service debts that were designed from the beginning to be unpayable. The socio-economic dimension of this story is not subtext, it is the text. Jung-chan is writing about class warfare, the kind that happens not on battlefields but in contract clauses and compound interest calculations. The rich exploit the poor not through violence, although violence comes later, but through systems. Legal systems, financial systems. Systems designed to look fair while functioning as extraction machines. And Geon-woo takes it personally. Because his mother is inside that machine. Because he's watched her sign documents she didn't fully understand. Because he's watched the debt grow and grow and grow despite her making payments. Because he understands with a fury that is quiet and devastating that the system is not broken. It's working exactly as it intended. The line between survival and rebellion blurs, incrementally until Geon-woo and Woo-jin realize, with something between terror and resignation, that they've crossed a point of no return. And this is where the manhwa becomes truly exceptional. Because unlike fantasy stories where the protagonist can simply power up to meet increasing threats, these two men have no escalation path. They cannot level up. They cannot acquire new abilities. They cannot call upon divine intervention. They have their bodies, their judo, their conditioning, and each other. Smile Capital, by contrast, has functionally unlimited resources. Armed enforcers, political connections, the ability to make people disappear without consequence, The power imbalance is not a gap. It is a chasm. And yet, there is something profoundly compelling about watching two people face an impossible situation and choose to fight anyway. Not because they believe they'll win, not because they've calculated favorable odds, but because surrender requires a betrayal of something fundamental about who they are. Geon-woo cannot walk away from his mother's debt. Woo-jin cannot walk away from Geon-woo. It is that simple, and that unbreakable. The fight sequences in this section are breathtaking. Jung-chan understands anatomy in a way that makes every impact feel viscerally real. The choreography is grounded, throws that obey physics, grapples that follow real judo mechanics, strikes that carry weight and consequence. No impossible acrobatics, no physics-defying techniques. Just two men who know how to fight, applying that knowledge against opponents who are better armed, but significantly less prepared for someone who genuinely doesn't care about getting hurt. I cover a great deal of content on this channel. Overpowered protagonists, system awakenings, regression fantasies, and I enjoy all of it. But Bloodhounds does something that none of those stories can do. It makes you worry. When a protagonist has a system that guarantees their growth, or a divine ability that ensures they'll survive, the tension is performative. You know they'll be fine. The question is merely how spectacularly they'll triumph. Here, the safety net doesn't exist. Kim Geon-woo and Hong Woo-jin are mortal men with mortal bodies fighting against an organization that destroys people as a routine operational expense. Every fight carries genuine risk. Every confrontation could be the last, and Jung-chan is brave enough to let his characters get hurt. Really hurt. Not as a temporary setback before a dramatic recovery, but as permanent damage that they carry forward. The victories feel earned because they cost something real. The defeats are devastating because the characters cannot simply regenerate or level past the consequences. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Bloodhounds is its anger. This is a story that is furious about something real. Predatory lending in Korea is not a fictional construct, it is a social crisis that has ruined countless lives. Jung-chan channels that anger into a narrative that is simultaneously entertaining and genuinely subversive. The villains of Bloodhounds are not monsters or demons, they are businessmen. They are the system itself, and the heroes are not chosen ones anointed by destiny. They are two broke kids who decided that enough was enough. That resonance is what elevates this from a crime thriller to something genuinely important. The friendship between Geon-woo and Woo-jin is the emotional backbone. In a story that could easily become relentlessly grim, their relationship provides warmth without sentimentality. They joke, they argue. Woo-jin's loud, chaotic energy bounces off Geon-woo's quiet discipline in ways that are genuinely funny. There's a scene where Woo-jin insists on a particular strategy that is, by any rational analysis, insane. And Geon-woo's silent, resigned agreement is funnier than any punchline could be. These moments of levity make the darkness surrounding them more bearable, for them and for the reader. And crucially, the friendship is tested. Not by betrayal, that would be too easy, too formulaic. It's tested by circumstance, by the question of how far you follow someone you love into a fight that might kill you both. Woo-jin never hesitates. That's what makes him extraordinary. Not his durability, not his fighting spirit, his loyalty. Absolute, irrational, magnificent loyalty. The art deserves particular recognition. Jung-chan's fight panels are not just technically accomplished, they're choreographed. You can follow the mechanics of each grapple, each throw, each counter. The artist understands weight, momentum, and the physics of impact in a way that makes these scenes feel like you're watching a real fight, not reading one. What I've covered today is the foundation. The opening arcs establish who Geon-woo and Woo-jin are, and what they're capable of, and the scale of the enemy they've chosen to confront. Bloodhounds expands considerably from here. Smile Capital is not a simple criminal operation. Its tentacles reach into legitimate institutions, political structures, and industries that affect millions of people. Geon-woo and Woo-jin begin to understand that the fight they've entered is larger than they imagined. The predatory lending machine is not one company, it is a network, and dismantling it requires more than judo throws and iron wills. The allies and enemies they accumulate along the way add layers of complexity that enrich the narrative substantially. New fighters enter, old debts resurface. The moral lines that seemed clear at the beginning become blurred in ways that force both Geon-woo and Woo-jin to confront what they are willing to do and what they are willing to become to see this through. But at its core, it remains what it was from Chapter 1. Two men, their skills, and an absolute unbreakable refusal to accept that power belongs only to those with wealth and leverage. Bloodhounds ran for 85 chapters on Manhwa Webtoon from 2019 to 2020. It is available in English on Webtoon. If you are looking for the manhwa, the Korean title is Sangyang-gadol. It is, without reservation, one of the finest grounded crime stories the medium has ever produced. And if you need further proof of how good this story is, Netflix adapted it as a live-action series in June 2023, starring Woo Do-hwan as Geon-woo and Lee Sang-yi as Woo-jin. The adaptation changed the martial art from judo to boxing, but kept the core narrative of two fighters battling a predatory lending empire. Season 1 was a significant success, and Season 2 has been confirmed, with Rain joining the cast as a new villain. Whether you read the original manhwa or watched the Netflix series, this story deserves your attention. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know in the comments which arc you want me to cover next. Manhwa Recap Vault covers the most compelling stories in the genre, every week. Subscribe if you'd like to be here for the next one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next recap.